So in case you haven't seen it, I want to give you a quick synopsis of the movie my character Joy is from. Inside Out is a film from Disney that explores the inside of a child's mind. The film personifies the feelings of a girl, Riley, that she feels by creating characters out of each of the emotions that she experiences. Sadness, fear, disgust, and joy are each characters who live in Riley's mind and battle to control Riley's thoughts, feelings, and actions through a center console that exists in Riley's mind. It's a very cute way of exploring how an 11-year-old learns to regulate her thoughts and feelings based in, it turns out, neuroscience and development. Inside Out 2 is a sequel that just came out this summer. It follows up with Riley, who's been coexisting peacefully with all of her emotions since we left her 2 years ago. Suddenly, the red button labeled puberty goes off, and everything changes. The console is destroyed in the middle of the night and rebuilt with new emotion characters who enter the scene. Embarrassment, envy, ennui, and anxiety. Inside Out 2 wrestles with the very real changes that occur inside Riley's brain as her brain expands its complexity and her world becomes larger. Joy is a central character in both films. In the first film, she has conflict with the character Sadness. The character emotions discover together that any of Riley's memories, shown in the movie as bowling ball-sized marbles, any of those memories that Sadness touches become tinged with sadness. Riley's family has recently moved, and Joy is determined for Riley to have good memories of this transition. And so to protect Riley's memories from getting tinged with sadness, Joy relegates sadness far away from the brain console. Of course, it doesn't work to repress our feelings. And so over the course of the movie, Joy and all the other characters learn that they are all needed for Riley's flourishing. When the second movie, Inside Out 2, opens up, we find Joy, the character, still trying to control or influence Riley's feelings, and I do not relate to this whatsoever. Riley's life experiences keep generating all of these feelings and memories that Joy doesn't know what to do with, from times when Riley does something embarrassing or awkward or straight up mean. Rather than allowing Riley's sense of self, a sort of glowy flower that grows up in the mind from all the experiences that Riley has, rather than allowing that sense of self to be influenced by some of these awkward or mean or embarrassing moments, Joy sends them careening to the back of the mind, this huge pile of marbles that Joy jettisons out to help keep them from helping to develop Riley's sense of self based on those feelings. And in both movies, Joy wants to believe everything is good. She wants her person, Riley, to experience nothing but goodness in her life. And Joy suppresses and ignores all that tries to change her opinion or her mind. And for a while, that seems to hold together. But then puberty comes along and uproots everything, tears out the console, kicks Joy and the other original emotions out, and sends them to the memory bank. The thing is, anxiety, the character anxiety, she has the same goal as Joy does for Riley. For her to be happy, for things to go well for her. But the way that anxiety manages that is by trying to control all future outcomes. And anxiety does that by projecting endless terrible outcomes into Riley's brain. In some cases, these imagined outcomes prompt Riley into action. She gets up earlier from some extra hockey practice on the ice. She reaches out to make new friends. But the character of anxiety sometimes becomes, drumroll, anxious. And when she does, she makes Riley utterly miserable, tossing and turning at night as terrible scenarios play in her head, turning her back on old friends, even getting a panic attack when the anxiety becomes overwhelming. Joy and anxiety wrestle over Riley's sense of self, that flower that is in Riley's mind. Joy has cultivated memories that offer Riley a sense of self. And that sense of self tells her, I am a good person. I am a good person. And the character of anxiety doesn't mean to, but in her future worry, she projects a sense of self that starts to tell Riley, I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough. As I think about the anxiety that many of us in our country have over this upcoming election, I wonder if, in part, this election is about the battle of who we understand ourselves to be. That sense of self that we cultivate from our actions, our memories, our experiences. Some of us, I might argue, are determined to see the good parts in our country. Its glorious democratic ideals, its trend toward liberty, its storied immigrant narrative. I wonder if to believe all that stuff all the time about our country, we occupy ourselves sometimes as Joy does, by shoving the not-so-good things to the pile in the back of the mind. The harm that capitalism does to those forgotten parts of Appalachia. The efforts that Black people had to go to force the rest of us to cede some of our power. There are others in this country that are very clear about a different view of America than we might hold. They have borne the brunt of our economy's delivery of cheap goods as their factories that sustain their towns shut down. Our zest for a consumer economy that has hollowed out the factories and the labor that used to fund their towns and families. They are experiencing the slip of power from their grasp, and as marginalized rural people who believe that the only power they had was that, since they don't have many educational or economic prospects. They might be projecting forward and seeing a world in which they are irrelevant, their heritage dismissed, and their skills made useless, while the world marches on without them. They see a world where they are irrelevant, and their anxiety is creating in them, I wonder, a vortex, like the one that gave Riley a panic attack, surrounding them and swinging them around in their worry. Both joy and anxiety in the two different movies decide that the other feelings aren't important. Joy kicks sadness out in the first movie, and anxiety kicks joy out in the second. Each of them insist on the primacy of their narrative, that their way is the best, the only, the right way forward. Sound familiar to some of the rhetoric that we've been hearing? Peaceful coexistence finally comes when they remove both of those absolute statements and allow all of the negative thoughts and experiences that Joy has relegated to the back of the mind to become integrated into Riley's sense of self. So rather than, I am a good person, I'm not good enough, Riley's thoughts and memories start to surface, I'm a mean person, I'm a good person, I'm a selfish person, I'm generous, I'm patient, I get frustrated too easily. All of these begin to form Riley's new sense of self, a more complex and nuanced idea of who they are. Envy, embarrassment, disgust, they all have a place in the ecosystem. It only works when each makes space for the other to bring forward their feelings, have them counted, seen as legitimate. We are all of us, in a state of anxiety these days. Some of us are managing it better than others. Some of us are not. But all of us, no matter which way you plan to vote, are worried about our country's future. Our country is experiencing deep paroxysms of growth and upheaval, of a sense of questioning who our country is and what we stand for, what we represent, what our sense of self tells us about who we are. I don't mean to be dismissive of the very real concerns that we all have as this election approaches. But I do wonder if absorbing the lessons from Joy and her motley crew might guide us. They too wished the others had a different perspective. They too had to learn how to live with each other. They too had to make their way toward accepting the perspective of the other, that the other had a gift to offer them, or at least to the wider sense of self. There is a quality of integrating and accepting the way in which we see our country and its welfare and its future that we might learn from that. I don't think it means accepting the future that each one of us project. I don't think it means accepting the future that anxiety is casting for us. But it does mean taking seriously the fears and feelings of those who believe different from us are operating out of. It requires digging deep to understand, or even, dare I say, empathize with some of the fears that are driving those who would vote differently than us. As we enter the last 2 weeks of the election, we do not know which way it will go. But once Election Day comes and goes, and as a winner to this presidential election is declared and hopefully accepted, either way, we still have to accept the reality that half the voters of this country wanted their candidate to win, wanted it fervently, wanted it abundantly. And so however the election falls, we must, all of us, commit to better understanding of our neighbors. Not simply resting out of relief if our candidate dominates them through a defeat, but really pushing ourselves to understand that what the feelings were that half the country felt when they voted the other way. Because as much as we want to join Joy in her effervescent, glowy celebration of her life, her vision of the world and the future is very one-dimensional. It is not complete. Our sense of self, of our country, must include our neighbors, with their fears, their anxieties, their disgust and sadness over the world. It must include our own feelings of the same. In times of anxiety and in all times, we can take our cue from Halloween, a night where we welcome the monsters among us, our neighbors, and of our own hearts that show up on our door, demanding that we open it to them, demanding an audience, needing to be heard and seen. May we do so for each of our neighbors and for us in these next few weeks. Amen.